Let me ask you, what's happening in this country? Who owns it? Where's the money? Who took it?
Rochester.
Rochester?
Yeah.
You mean like in the burbs here?
Yeah.
Oh, you're thinking small.
Do you ever feel like all you do is work, but never seem to get ahead?
I'm thinking the money's in the Cayman Islands and shit. Yeah. GM not paying anything, Amazon not paying anything. Stock market's like this, and nobody here got stock. How the fuck is the stock market doing this? And there's nothing in here. Right?
Like the system is set up for you to fail.
It doesn't make any sense. It's a record stock market. Who the fuck's buying a car? Look at my raggedy ass shit. I'm not buying a car.
You're right. It's a rigged game. For over 70 years, our leaders have told us one thing under the bright lights.
The protection of the lives and property of Americans is the responsibility of all public officials.
I care. We're trying.
We have it so well under control.
Help is here, and we will not stop working for you.
But for decades, America's shadow government and its powerful friends have spent trillions of dollars on an agenda that serves their interests, not ours.
You guys paid for all this.
So when the shit really hits the fan, we're on our own.
This is not science fiction. This is reality in America right now.
The truth is, the rich and powerful will do whatever it takes to save themselves, while the rest of us die. For years, nobody could figure out how Jeffrey Epstein afforded so many luxuries. A high school math teacher who lied about his degree and was fired for poor performance, and then fired again from his job at an investment firm. But behind these doors, Epstein hobnobbed with some of the richest and most powerful people in the world.
Sheiks from the Middle East, great intellectuals and thinkers and businessmen. Epstein sort of had like a Svengali-like hold over some of the wealthiest, most powerful businessmen in the country.
And somehow this didn't change, even after Epstein was convicted for having sex with teenage girls. How did Epstein translate this incredible access to power into his personal wealth? Some speculate he secretly worked for intelligence agencies. Others assumed he was supplying rich old men with underage girls for sex and getting paid to keep quiet. But according to some reports, the secret to Epstein's vast fortune is that he supplied his mega-rich friends with something they valued more than sex, a way to avoid paying their fair share of taxes.
The Epstein story is kind of like covering the weather. Sometimes it rains, and when it does, it pours. Yesterday was one of those days.
Take Leon Black, the controversial CEO of one of Wall Street's most lucrative investment firms. His net worth, more than $9 billion. He once claimed he was being extorted by a Russian model whom he'd given millions over a 5-year affair. But what really shocked people was his business dealings with Jeffrey Epstein.
The private equity billionaire Leon Black hired him to avoid about $2 billion in taxes using something called a grant or retained annuity trust, a GRAT.
A GRAT is just part of an arsenal of complex schemes like equity swaps and offshore shell companies that the super wealthy use to avoid paying vast amounts of tax. With cute names like the Double Irish with the Dutch sandwich. The scheme works by transferring your company's intellectual property to an Irish subsidiary that's actually managed by people in some other place, like Bermuda. And then the IP is licensed to another Irish company that's actually in Ireland, which sends everything to another subsidiary in the Netherlands, which then sends everything to an offshore tax haven, often on a beach, where the IRS can't touch it. Easy peasy. It's all difficult to understand, and that's by design, which is why someone like Leon Black might pay someone like Jeffrey Epstein a seemingly massive fee, even by Wall Street standards.
You're going to save $2 billion. Maybe paying $158 million to save $2 billion is a good investment.
Epstein was just one small part of a vast industry that exists for the sole purpose of helping some of the richest people in America avoid their fair share of taxes. It's all part of a larger story of how the wealthy have used their riches and power to trick us all out of the American dream, rigging the system so they always win, while the rest of us lose.
The wealth defense industry is the army of tax attorneys, wealth managers, accountants, people who work with the world's wealthiest families. They're paid millions to hide trillions. They are the financial butlers to the super rich.
Chuck Collins doesn't just investigate this complex world of hiding wealth. It's an inherited skill.
My baloney has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R.
He happens to be the great-grandson of Oscar Mayer.
A-Y-E-R.
I grew up in the wealthiest 1%. My great-grandfather ran a successful meatpacking business. 4 generations later, here I am. Now, I made a decision in my early 20s that I didn't really want to benefit from a system of dynastic and inherited wealth. What that did is it gave me an insight into this whole system, and particularly how the wealth defense industry, which are often what families consider the trusted advisors to the family, are part of the enablers. They're the fixers. They're the ones that wealthy families hire to move their money to the shadows.
So one way to look at it is the wealthy would rather spend money on their lawyers than pay higher taxes. If they can game the system, if they can pay for lobbyists, they're willing to pay a lot. So it's not like the rich don't want to pay, they just don't want to pay the federal government. I guess they think the rest of us should be paying taxes so they don't have to.
Facing elite armies of tax attorneys and accountants, the IRS realizes in the early 2000s that they need to come up with a way to fight back.
We can think of as a SEAL Team 6, an elite unit of auditors to go after the super wealthy.
But the wealthy move quickly to disarm this new IRS unit tasked with getting their money. They get their friends in government to go after the IRS instead.
One of the things that's happened over the last 10 years is that the capacity of the Internal Revenue Service to do oversight of the super rich has been decimated. You're 4 times more likely to be audited if you use their earned income credit, which is a tax provision for low and middle income households, than if you're a super rich person.
When you look at who's audited, the IRS is auditing EITC claimants in the South. More than 50% of Black Americans live in the South. So why is it that we see the earned income tax credit getting so much scrutiny from the IRS, but not high income, high wealth individuals? Why? Because it's easier. The typical earned income tax claimant doesn't have a plethora of lawyers on retainer. They're an easy mark.
But the truth about how much taxes the wealthy avoid paying is even more astounding than most people realize.
I think that people had a cynical, jaded sense that the ultra-wealthy get away with it. But no one had ever seen the numbers.
Tax information is among the most closely guarded secrets in America. But in 2021, the news site ProPublica revealed that it had 15 years of tax records for the wealthiest individuals in the country.
I don't think anyone really understood that people like Jeff Bezos, who's the richest human being in the world, or Elon Musk, who runs Tesla and has been the second richest person in the world, could pay 0 in taxes, in federal income taxes, in recent years. Elon Musk paid 0 in 2018. Jeff Bezos paid 0 federal income taxes in 2 recent years, 2007 and 2011. Michael Bloomberg paid 0 in taxes in recent years. George Soros did it. And so that was pretty shocking in and of itself, that they could literally get their bill down to zero.
Perhaps the most surprising thing is that for the most wealthy people in America, the top 0.1%, the tax rates don't seem to apply. And while Washington debates raising the tax rate on the wealthy, the super wealthy may as well be living in outer space.
We're essentially having a debate that's an entirely a non sequitur. We are fixated on rates. Rates dominate our conversation, but we're really not talking about the essential things that matter.
Earthlings say the only two constants in life are death and taxes. But for billionaires, there's only death. Here's how that works. If you're super wealthy, you get to decide what your income really is. You simply choose not to pay yourself. Leave your wealth alone in your company or your investments.
They sit on this mountain of wealth. It appreciates in value, and they don't sell and they don't spend down their fortunes. Instead, they borrow against their fortunes to fund their lifestyle or help their business.
While for the rest of us, borrowing means going into debt. For the uber rich, it's a way to sequester their wealth from the IRS.
And then they can, at the very end, when they die, they can avoid the taxes at the end of life, the estate tax. And so they are really outside of the tax system.
Of course, wealthy individuals aren't alone in avoiding paying taxes. In 2020, 55 of the richest corporations in America also got away with paying zero taxes.
Well, we end up living in a society where we, the people, pay for all of the external costs of the corporation. So McDonald's can give us cheaper hamburgers because we're paying for the roads that its big trucks are going back and forth on to create a fast food empire. And that's the way every corporation tends to work. They look at whatever's going to cost them money and they figure out how to externalize that to the public sector. Where we end up in is a world with a crumbling infrastructure, with no social services, unable to pay for basic medical care for people.
The government has no money of its own, except what it takes directly and indirectly in levies and taxes from every pay envelope.
Perhaps the strangest part of this story is that we did it to ourselves. How did we become convinced that bankrupting our government was good for us? Even as bridges and roads crumbled, the costs of college and housing exploded, wages flatlined, and the middle class began to disappear.
This film describes some of the ways psychologists conduct a science of behavior. For much of this film, we will study a simple response, such as pecking by a pigeon.
During World War II, the Pentagon hired behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner to launch a series of experiments called Project Pigeon.
The first rule for teaching anything is to structure the situation so that the behavior is likely to occur.
The military wanted him to create pigeon-guided missiles.
So he built these boxes where he would put pigeons and there would be signs. And the signs the pigeons would have to hit, and then when they hit those, then eventually food would come out.
You might define reading as the ability to emit an appropriate differential response to written commands. Actually, pigeons are capable of good pattern discrimination.
And what he could demonstrate is very quickly this stimulus and reward system would feed the pigeons, and they would learn. Even these stupid creatures could learn exactly what they needed to do to survive. Well, that's exactly the structure we've built for Congress.
Shaping consists of reinforcing closer and closer approximations of the response we wish to condition. Sometimes we used a nudge or a kick under the table.
Just like the pigeons in the Skinner box experiments learned which buttons they needed to push to get the sustenance they needed to eat, so too Congress people learn which buttons they need to push to get the sustenance their campaigns need to survive.
And what politicians need most to survive is money to fuel their next campaign.
This Congress in the United States spends anywhere between 30 and 70% of its time raising campaign money. But it doesn't raise money from the average American. It raises money from a tiny, tiny fraction of the 1%.
They have become conditioned reinforcers, and they can exert a great deal of control over behavior.
And if that tiny fraction objects to anything Congress might want to do, it's extraordinarily hard to get Congress to do it.
Our subjects are available when we need them.
So, when any major issue, like gun safety legislation, or healthcare reform, or the minimum wage comes up, the question is whether these funders oppose it or not. And if they oppose it, it's not going to happen.
The presentation of an aversive stimulus is called punishment.
It's simple. He who pays the piper calls the tune.
How did we get here? To a system where the rich and powerful steer our government into serving them instead of the people who elected it. To answer that, we have to go back to the 1970s.
The Vietnam War is raging, and there are protests in the streets. There's also a rising movement of consumer protection.
The abuses are flagrant. Hot dogs made of substandard meat. Toothpastes that don't prevent cavities.
Ralph Nader is taking on the big car companies.
Testify here this morning, Mr. Nader. I think it's a tribute that I don't have to take the time to introduce you if you just proceed.
Saying that they're making unsafe cars and they're profiting at the expense of people's safety. And there is a rising environmental movement.
The public begins to demand their representatives in government fix the problems, and government responds. President Nixon creates the EPA. Congress passes the Clean Air and Water Acts, and other governmental agencies step in to begin imposing new health and safety regulations on big business.
So you're beginning to get a great pushback, and the corporate captains who have been making tons of money and feeling like they sort of rule society are thrown back on their heels.
Enter Lewis F. Powell.
So Lewis Powell was kind of a big deal Virginia lawyer, represented big corporations, especially big tobacco.
In 1971, there's a paper written by Lewis Powell, who would later be a Supreme Court justice, and he warns, corporate America, you better fight back because you're going to lose your place in society.
The confidential paper becomes known as the Powell memo.
Even to this day, I find that people are amazed when they hear about it because it is like a document that would exist in a fictional account.
Powell argues that corporate America is under an unprecedented attack and is losing its grip on the levers of power. The memo presents a detailed battle plan for how to secretly get it back.
Everybody from Ralph Nader to Ho Chi Minh were freaking him and his circle out, like, oh my God, what's happening?
He basically said, look, if we don't organize to defend business against populist regulation, America as we know it is going to disappear.
Powell warns that the right needs to launch a shadow campaign to influence academia, sway the courts, and fight back against liberal voices in the media.
It's like this call to arms of corporate America.
For much of the 70s, the public sees elected officials as something like their lawyer, the place to go to get a local river cleaned up or an unsafe car recalled.
There is padding here, presumably might reduce the possibility of getting your teeth broken if you hit it.
But for Powell's memo to work, that needs to change. And by 1980, that relationship between the public and their government will come under attack.
Thank you very much.
Skyrocketing inflation and slow growth produce a new phenomenon in America. They call it stagflation. Millions are struggling more than they've had to in a generation. And suddenly, a lot of Americans are receptive to the idea that big government is to blame. All of this sets the stage for a presidential candidate who will echo Powell's call to arms.
And then he took another crack at the American people and said that we had inflation because you and I were living too well. You and I living too well is not the cause of inflation. We have inflation because government is living too well.
But when it comes to getting people to lose faith in government, Ronald Reagan may not be the most significant candidate in 1980.
I will faithfully execute the office.
Almost completely unnoticed at the time is the Libertarian Party's campaign. Running as that party's vice presidential candidate is a little-known Kansas businessman named David Koch, with his brother Charles working in the background.
I never grow tired of bragging about that.
They're running from the right against Reagan. They consider Reagan too much of a sellout liberal.
There's an enormous antagonism now in the American population towards big government, which is unresponsive, uncaring, and yes, even repressive.
The Kochs don't just want to get big government out of the way of corporate America. They seem to want to get rid of all government, including ending the minimum wage and canceling social programs like Social Security and Medicare. None of it is popular.
They get nowhere. David Koch spends something like $2 million of his own money on his own campaign, and they get a tiny percentage of the vote. It's a super flop.
David Koch's ideals are rejected by voters. So privately, he begins crafting a plan to reshape American politics and rig the system to favor the wealthy.
And so they go back to the drawing board, and they think, okay, if we want to take over American politics, we're not going to be able to do it democratically. We can't win the votes. They want to own the politicians.
In order to avoid taxes, the Koch brothers have been making large philanthropic donations to charities for years.
They realized at some point that they can create their own charities, and they will call them private foundations. And these will become sort of treasury chests for their own personal favorite projects. So what they're spending on is pushing their personal political beliefs, which in the case of the Kochs were extraordinarily right-wing.
With this new strategy, the Kochs divert money from the public purse by pouring hundreds of millions into think tanks and political organizations, all geared at influencing the government to serve the interests of people with wealth. But none of these organizations are as effective at pushing their personal agenda as ALEC.
It sounds kind of friendly, you know, it's like that guy you know, ALEC, but actually it stands for the American Legislative Exchange Council. And it is a really conservative organization that works at the state level to change policy.
Here's how it works. Let's say a credit card company wants to change state law to make it easier for collection agencies to go after bad debts, rather than go state to state and try to get a law passed, which is expensive and time-consuming. ALEC will do the work for you.
ALEC has created a pay-to-play system whereby big corporations can join the organization and become paying members on the legislative committee. A corporation will help write a bill, and then ALEC will replicate that bill and transmit it to conservative members in state legislatures around the country.
Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he said,
We're raised thinking that we the people drive the bus, and there we are, we the people, turning the steering wheel, but it turns out the steering wheel is disconnected from the wheels in the bus. Doesn't matter which way we turn it, the bus is gonna go the direction the bus is gonna go, and it turns out the direction the bus is gonna go is the direction that the economic elite or organized special interest groups want, not the average voter.
Owning politicians was only part of the plan. To become truly powerful, the captains of corporate America need to trick the public into abandoning the American dream. Before the 1980s, the CEOs of the biggest companies in America earned about 30 times the salary of the average worker.
The CEO of the company lived in the same town with the workers of the company. His kids went to the same school as the kids of the workers in the company. It was more like a family business, really, where the object of the game is not to earn enough money to bequeath it to your kid as a trust fund. The idea was to have a company that's successful enough that it's still there and thriving, so your kid's gonna wanna work at it. You wanted your workers and your customers to like you, like Macy's, so you give them fireworks, you give them a parade, you contribute to the hospital, and you do these things so that they're nice to you, so that they like your kid. They have to see you kind of as a friend of the community. But this was a time when the CEO was making 10, 20, maybe 100 times more than the janitor in the company, where now the CEO is making thousands of times more than the worker in the company. And he's not living anywhere near those workers. The object of the game, winning, means setting yourself apart from this company. They're the suckers, you're the winner. And you're relating instead, you're relating to your shareholders, you're relating to the board of directors. You're in this other world. And you see your employees and your customers kind of in the same light. It's like those are the peasants.
My view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. Some people come into the meeting and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people just, they drain energy from the meeting.
As the wealth of CEOs continues to reach new heights, the average American employee is working harder and longer for less. Because for decades, corporate America had a plan to make it that way.
We bring good things to live in. We bring good things to life.
At GE, we're in the business of making products.
In 1981, a chemical engineer named Jack Welch takes the helm of General Electric with big plans for the company that is already a household name in America.
What he did was he decided one day that he makes less money selling a washing machine to someone than he does lending the money to the person to buy the washing machine. Because when he makes a washing machine, he's got to buy the metal and the glass and the workers and their insurance and all that. And he makes some profit. But when he lends money to someone to buy the washing machine, he gets pure interest. The new thing is you should try to get out of your productive industries as quickly as possible and get into financialization. And everybody went, you know, you're right. Anybody who's actually making something or providing a service, they're in the suckers game. People that go into financial services, they're the ones who are making pure money.
We bring good things to life.
So he sold off all his productive assets. All the American companies started sending everything overseas, and that changed the way we think of business.
Perhaps the most influential and imitated, not to mention controversial corporate CEO of the last half-century.
As American industry begins a transformation in the 1980s, so too do the CEOs. As figures like Jack Welch and Lee Iacocca at Chrysler start focusing on making the most profit instead of the best products, they are greeted like corporate heroes.
In more than half a century, big business titans hadn't been so celebrated and so treated as quasi-fictional characters. It was remarkable. This kind of breathless kind of movie star adoration that you began seeing in the 1980s.
Welcome to television's unchallenged authority on wealth, prestige, and success.
In the 1980s, Americans' new obsession with affluence fills the airways with TV shows like Dallas and Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Meet the stars of show business and big business. Discover how life's winners live, love, and spend their fortunes. I'm bored.
And even as the standard of living begins to flatline for middle-class Americans, a new American dream is being marketed that says you can live the lifestyle of the rich and famous using two magical words. Charge it.
I bought my skis in Aspen.
No, Switzerland.
This is the dawn of discover.
As Americans are being seduced with the benefits of paying with plastic,
In
In this world, you're always reaching for something better. Nothing to get impatient.
Groups like ALEC are helping to get credit card companies deregulated, removing any legal limit on their interest rates.
Because the higher you aim, the bigger the payoff should be. It should be, and it is with the Discover card.
Within 25 years, the average American's debt quadruples, and the corporate elites selling the updated dream are the only ones getting richer.
We can't have this discussion without mentioning the Oliver Stone movie Wall Street. Here's this extraordinary monologue by Michael Douglas playing Gordon Gekko, giving that pitch.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
And even though Gordon Gekko was ostensibly the villain of that piece, he really wasn't.
Thank you very much.
I saw that movie in a theater on the Upper East Side, and there were a lot of people applauding, along with the actors in the movie applauding.
Only this new and improved America is anything but. The so-called Reagan Revolution, the one that got citizens to turn on their government, it left the wealth of corporate captains soaring while the wages of workers flatlines, minimum wage stagnates, and job security all but disappears. At General Electric, Jack Welch realizes that in this newly financialized landscape, cutting costs are the key to raising the value of the company and his personal wealth.
And he transformed all of GE into a brutally honest meritocracy in which every employee is ranked from the very top down to the bottom 10%.
Brutally honest meritocracy is GE speak for ruthlessly firing employees, earning Welch the nickname Neutron Jack. But he was hardly alone. Instead of innovating new products, financial innovation becomes the preoccupation of corporate America. By any means necessary, get stock value up.
For all they care, companies could be producing nothing or losing money or whatever. It doesn't matter. The stock price is all we care about.
The financialized landscape of America gives rise to a new way of thinking. The CEOs view the world through a lens that's fundamentally different.
And that's important because they drift off into their own kind of fantasy world of like self-driving cars and everything's going to be okay, when in fact, the society that they're creating is sinking into deeper and deeper crisis.
The story we were all sold was that the free market and financialization would make us all rich, that greed is good. Instead, it turns out that the wealth of corporate America has been built on systemic poverty.
If you're living on the average person's income, that hasn't risen in 50 years. It's the same as it was in the 70s, essentially. But now you have to pay thousands of percent more for the basics. Childcare, education, healthcare, retirement. What does that do? That leaves you in debt. The average American now dies in debt.
Consumers in the 70s.
The old implicit bargain that really built consensus. You play by the rules and you work hard, you're going to have a decent life. But that was really dependent on there being jobs that produced valuable products and therefore could afford to pay good wages to these workers. When the productive base was automated and then hollowed out and shipped to low-wage parts of the world, that meant that that route to a decent working-class life was foreclosed.
What have 4 decades of corporate greed done to the American dream today?
Every town's got this. It's just we're a spectacle. Fuck it, look at it. It's not normal.
This is Detroit. Just half a century ago, it was the richest city in the world.
The reason we're sensitive about it is because we lived in it. You know, our grandpas were working in it. It still hurts. And I'm telling you, the rest of the country, I'm telling you, we were the spiritual, mechanical, and financial center of this country. Look at us. You think you're immune to it? Many things happen in Detroit. Greed, management greed, union greed. The financial crisis, globalization, foreign competition, laziness on our part, race problems. But what really killed it was Wall Street. That's what really, really pushed it over the edge.
Like a stout heart within the city is Detroit industry, which has put the world on wheels.
Cars once built Detroit, and Detroit drove America's prosperity. Now the city is a shell of its former self. From a population of nearly 2 million to 650,000, and enough empty lots to fill all of Manhattan and San Francisco. Charlie LeDuff is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who quit his job at the New York Times to write about his hometown. Because Detroit is in many ways the story of America. A story of what financial greed leaves in its wake.
I go in Dan Gilbert owns that building, he owns that building, he owns that building, he owns that building, he owns that building.
Meet Dan Gilbert, a Detroit businessman who founded a private mortgage company in the 80s called Quicken Loans. By the 2000s, Quicken Loans had grown into the largest online lender in America. And by the time the 2007 financial meltdown came around, Detroit was ground zero for the housing collapse. Nearly 3/4 of all mortgages in the city were of the risky and suspect subprime variety.
Back in the day when we bundled the mortgage and they were giving them the pigs, you know what I mean? Dead people. Non-existent people, and they were bundling them into financial instruments. Dan Gilbert said, from Quicken Loans said, I never sold subprime mortgages. So I know the people at the office of registrar. I got 1,600 mortgages originated by Quicken Loans. Took a random sample of the beautiful mortgages that he issued. Within 10 years, half of them went belly up, and half of the ones that went belly up were either stripped, burned, or occupied by squatters.
The financial meltdown in 2007 was caused in great part by the greed of financial institutions like Quicken Loans, offering easy mortgages and the promises of a decent life, even though that life had become unaffordable. And when those loans collapsed, so did Detroit. But not the financial institutions. The Justice Department settles its case against Quicken, which never admits to wrongdoing. While their borrowers pack up and vacate their now foreclosed homes, Quicken not only survives, but then thrives by going public.
A multi-billion-dollar IPO, and I'm told it will be one of the largest, if not the largest IPO in the U.S. this year.
The sale made Dan Gilbert the 17th richest person in America.
We think if the check cleared, Jim.
But Gilbert's business dealings in Detroit didn't stop with Quicken Loans.
We're very, very proud to have the opportunity to own this property here.
Gilbert takes advantage of the fire sale prices he helped ignite to spend billions buying nearly 100 properties in a city decimated by risky lending.
He owns this block. He owns that building. He owns the building behind this building. He's gonna own this skyscraper. Wow.
Dan Gilbert had a little incentive for purchasing so much Detroit property.
Where's Dan? Where's Dan Gilbert?
Gilbert, who donated $750,000 to Trump's inaugural fund, seemed close to the president and his family.
Great friend of mine, a supporter and great guy.
And that is perhaps why he and a handful of other billionaires were first in line to benefit from a 2017 Trump tax break. It was sold to the American people as a way to attract investment in poor communities. But in truth, it provided a loophole for people like Gilbert to sink billions into empty office towers in downtown Detroit, while ignoring the poorer majority black areas surrounding downtown where people grappled with one of the highest crime rates in America. Detroit still has a poverty rate several times the national average, and 20 square miles of empty lots full of abandoned buildings.
Every town's got this. It's just we're a spectacle. We're a fucking spectacle. We were number one, not New York, not LA, not Philly, us. It's easy to look at. Go, look at these guys. Laugh if you want, but you are Detroit.
But what happens when the rich and corporate America have finally gutted it all, and there's nothing left to take?
You look at the banks and theaters and arenas of the 1940s and 50s Detroit. These are like palaces. This is a beautiful, booming place. And it wasn't just because it was growing, but because the growth, the economic activity was based in physical reality. When you have an entirely abstracted economy, you see it's much more like New York, where now you have these crazy, bizarre luxury towers sprouting out and up out of the landscape. These towers, that you can visualize them, they're extracting the value out of the city itself and removing it up into the sky. And people don't even live in these apartments. These apartments are basically like bonds. They're like stock certificates. They're these empty boxes that represent $100 million, $150 million, but they're not living places. They are bizarre pockets of abstracted value. They're trapped. It's like gas bubbles, it's not real.
For decades, we allowed the wealthy to live in an economic stratosphere, leaving the rest down on earth to pick up the tab.
If I go to the average middle and working class American and say, hey, buddy, you're already paying 20% of your income in taxes, and guess what? Jeff Bezos isn't paying anything, and Mark Zuckerberg isn't paying anything, and Amazon.com paid less taxes than you did, even though it's the world's most valuable corporation. And I go to that poor guy and I say, but guess what? Despite all that, your tax rate still has to rise if you want a functioning society. He'll look at me like I'm crazy. And he's right to do so because he doesn't have the money to pay more taxes. He doesn't have the money to pay more taxes because he's already living on the edge.
Living on the edge because the wealthy conspired to make it that way, to rig the system so they could win by making the rest of us poor. But as the corporate leaders were busy dismantling the American dream so their profits could reach new heights, did they see where it was all leading?
What they don't realize is if you take all the money off the table, you can't earn anymore. There's no more circulating. You've made your potential customers poor. You've made your potential employees poor and uneducated. And then you complain, there's nobody buying my stuff. There's no one smart enough to work. It's because you took everything away. If there's no public school, then what's gonna happen to your workforce? They're doing to America what they used to do to China and Africa. They used to do it to other people, and it was bad enough doing it to other people. The reason why you see some progressive awakening in America is because American citizens are realizing, oh my gosh, this thing that corporations used to do to all these people in Central America and Africa, they're doing it to us.